Right now, the Federal Family Education Loan Program, this was started in 1965, and this is what the vast majority of people are currently under. So about 80% of families, there's about 6.5 million students and parents each year, get their student loans through FFEL. What this program is essentially a public-private partnership where the government teams up with a private student loan vendor. When you apply for your Stafford loan, you get that through a private lender like, let's say, Sallie Mae. And it's structured like the loans that you'd think of, where you take out a certain amount of money up front, you pay that back at regular intervals, and you pay interest on the loan. Two things that a lot of people don't realize here is the federal government, if a student defaults on their loan, the federal government agrees with the private entity that it will pay 100% of that loan back. So the private entity has no real risk here.
That's why the interest rate can be so low.
Exactly. That said, if a student defaults on their loan, their credit rating is still going to be damaged, regardless of the fact that the government is picking up the tab. The other piece is the government subsidizes student loans from day one. So they actually say to the private lenders, we want you to be giving out student loans, so for every dollar you give out, we're going to be kicking in some money too. So the private lenders win twice here. They win because there's no risk of default, and they win because they're actually being paid to participate.
So why isn't every bank in the business of loaning money to students?
I mean, this is a big reason why so many private lenders are rushing to get into bed here, but what critics say is there's no real downside for the private lenders, and the U.S. government is spending an enormous amount of money to incentivize this system. Why are we doing it through private lenders? Why not just take it entirely in-house?
All right, and so therefore we have the federal direct loan programs as well.
So we have the federal direct loan program. This is something that under 20% of schools currently offer, but President Obama is a huge champion of. Now, the federal direct loan program used to be bigger. In 2006, it had about $8 billion in its war chest. By 2008, under President Bush, that went down to under $500 million because the Republicans said, look, the government shouldn't be financing this, let's push it onto the private sector.
Gotcha.
There's an increasing push now that we're in a Democratic administration to bring it back into the public sector. The way this works if you're a student is nearly identical, where you apply for student loans, you get those dollars, and you pay it back into the system. The difference is you're not going through a private lender, you're going directly to the federal government. So there are a couple pros and cons to this. On the pro end, you're only dealing with your student financial aid office and with the federal government. So it's a very clean transaction. There are not many middlemen that are getting involved along the way. The interest rate is a little bit better. So for a family education loan, the Parent Plus loan, that's if a parent wants to kick in, their rate's going to be 8.5%. Under a direct loan, your rate's going to be 7.9%. So it's a little bit better on the interest end. And just generally, you don't have to worry about things like small student loan providers that are untrustworthy getting in the middle. A student loan provider could go under, and then you're in trouble as a student. If it's the federal government, you're comfortable, it's insured, and everything is taken care of. Advocates also say that the federal government here, rather than just spending money to back private loans, is actually making money because they're the distributor. If profits are being made here, why not have the government handle those profits? And rather than having the government constantly subsidizing the private sector, let's just wrap that up in one box and do something that's easier for students and parents alike.
It makes a certain amount of sense. Now, is this program, like you said, the Obama administration is behind it, so does that mean that this program is on the move? Is it growing? So
the Obama administration, one of their biggest initiatives is to get the direct student loan program adopted by more colleges and universities throughout the country.
Because right now you said it's only at about 20% of higher education institutions?
Well, every higher institution can make the choice, but only about 20% currently are making that choice. He thought originally that right now more schools would be picking it up, but with the healthcare battle, this kind of got pushed off. So they're now thinking that it may be about a year before he fully rolls out this initiative and tries to get more schools to pick up on this.
But what are the cons, both from the perspective of the institution and of the perspective of the individual?
So there are downsides too. One is you're now dealing with the federal government for your student loan. So it's plus and it's a minus. That means that it's a little bit harder. You're dealing with public customer service centers, which aren't always in operation. You're going to be, in some cases, if you have questions, you may be referred to the IRS. You have to deal with kind of a bigger corporate bureaucracy. Private institutions, too, have a little bit more flexibility in terms of offering lower interest rates, in terms of negotiating with you. Some private student loans, if you get good grades, will actually reduce your repayments, or if you pay on time, they'll reduce your payments. That's not going to happen when it's government-based. If it's government, it's uniform. There's no real negotiating or bargaining. The rate is what it is, and the payment schedule is what it is. But overall, this is just a big thing that students need to take into account. When they visit colleges, ask up front, do you operate under FFEL? the Federal Family Education Loan Program, or do you operate under the Direct Loan Program? Because if you're deciding between two schools and they have these two different programs, that could be a deciding factor that not enough people take into account.
What type of, as you said, only about 20% have the direct loan program. What type of schools tend to go for that? Are they smaller technical schools? Are they the Ivy League schools? Or it's a whole variety?
It's a whole variety. Okay. So it's really school by school they're making this decision. And sometimes it is because kind of hidden political pushing one way or the other.
Our first question comes from Emily of New York City, and she asks, can you recommend a few different repayment programs for student loans?
Yes, so this is an important one. Everyone who takes out a student loan, there are lots and lots of different repayment programs, and you want to choose the one that's best suited for you. There are some where you're paying a lot of money up front, and you're going to pay off that loan in 10 years. There's some where you're paying a little bit less, and it may take 30 years. Well, one that was just passed in July of 2009 is called an income-based repayment program. And this is essentially you're paying 10% of your income, no matter what that income is. If you make less than $16,000, you actually don't start paying back yet. Once you hit that $16 threshold, it's 10%, and as you ramp up in your career, you're still only paying 10%, so it's a very manageable number. If you take 20 years or more, the federal government's just going to wipe out the rest of your debt, and you don't have to pay back anything. If you're in the nonprofit sector, after 10 years, the federal government will wipe out your student debt. So especially if you're thinking about a government job or a nonprofit, within 10 years, only paying 10% of your income each year, you're going to be in the clear. So this is worth looking into.
Pretty good deal, absolutely. All right, next question comes from Greg of Hartford, Connecticut. He asks, what's the difference between subsidized and unsubsidized Stafford loans? Good question, because a lot of students have both.
Yep. So subsidized Stafford loans are something that you have to qualify for. Your parents or your own income has to be below a certain level. And with this, you don't have to start paying interest on it. And generally, you can start repaying it from the point at which you graduate. And you can take out up to $23,000 from subsidized Stafford loans over the course of your education. You may also need to take out unsubsidized Stafford loans, which is you don't have to start paying it back until after you graduate, but interest is going to start building up from day one. The terms are slightly less favorable, but it's, again, $23,000. So you can take a mix of subsidized and unsubsidized and have up to $46,000 that you take out towards your education.
So if your parents do make over a certain amount of money, though, you're only eligible for the unsubsidized in that case. Loans.
And those are kind of first come, first serve. So you want to apply for those as early as humanly possible, because when those dollars run out, they're gone.
Do you know what the cutoff income amount is?
It differs from person to person, and they take a lot of different things into account. It's not just income. Sometimes it's property and trusts, assets.
Gotcha. All right. Next question comes from Peter of Berkeley, California. He tweeted in with, can you explain the terms deferment and forbearance? It's good, you know, a lot of these students, it's the first time they're dealing with loans, and a lot of this terminology is new, so it's always worth reviewing.
So deferment is if you have to take a longer absence from paying back your student loans. Let's say you go back to school, or you're in the military, or you have an extended sickness. You kind of tell the loan provider it may be a few years before I can pick up my payments again, and often they'll grant you that. Forbearance is more short-term hardship. So if again, you have an illness that's making you take a leave from work, or if you were laid off from your job, but you expect to have a new job within the next 6 months or so, you can tell your student loan provider, look, I'm having some trouble paying right now, but I'm going to be back on the bandwagon soon. Also with the forbearance, you can negotiate, you know what, I want to keep paying, but I want to pay less each month, or I want to pay less frequently. It's kind of a conversation between you and the provider to figure out.
You're not always granted these requests, right?
Yeah, so you have to have a good reason, and the provider themselves have to be in good financial health.
Right, okay, gotcha. All right, next question comes from Stephen of Chicago, Illinois. Is there a limit to how much money students can borrow for college? Can parents take out loans to help as well?
Yeah, so with the Stafford subsidized and unsubsidized, you can only take out $23,000 in each instance. After that point, if you need a little bit more help paying for college, you have grants and scholarships, but you also have your parents can take out something called a Federal Parent Plus loan. This is a difference where, depending if it's FFEL or a direct loan, that's either going to be 7.9% or 8.5% interest rate, but that can go for the entire cost of your college education.
But now your parents are the ones then responsible for repaying it, right?
Exactly. So that can go up to hundreds of thousands of dollars, but it's your parents' burden, and they're the ones who have to pay it back.
So they're the ones who have to decide whether or not they want to take out that loan. All right, the next question comes from Linda from Atlanta, Georgia, and she wants to know, can you pay college tuition using credit cards instead of taking out student loans? I'm sure you can, but whether or not that's recommended is another story.
So about 20% of college students admit using credit cards to pay for college. This is a terrible decision. It's an 18% interest rate on average for the money you take out, where we were just talking about either a 5.6% interest rate for Stafford loans or with the Parent Plus loan between 7.9 and 8.5%.
Yes.
Why pay 10% more interest because you want to use a credit card? There are federal structures in place to make this a lot easier and a lot cheaper.
So there's no excuse for it other than laziness, because here's your card and you're plunking it down. Because some of these student loans, the great interest rates, it takes a little bit of paperwork, it takes a little bit of elbow grease. You got to go out and search them out and actually apply for them, but it's worth it.
Yeah, a lot of students are enticed by these credit card reward programs, and they say, oh, $100,000, now I'm going to get a free flight or nice clothes. It's not worth it. You're going to pay a lot more in the long term. We don't recommend it.
Absolutely right. All right, Jordan Goldman, thank you once again for all your sage advice. And remember, if you have a question, go to our website, abcnews.com/business. Ask our team of personal finance experts all your finance questions, and we'll answer them right here on Good Money.
ABC News Now. Good to know.